But that depresses me because I agree with you that narcissism, and thank you for putting it that way, that it's always not a bad word. But again, when you are in this moment of oversimplification of psychology speak, which also can be problematic as well. We don't need to get into, psychoanalytics or modern day psychology, but to oversimplify that stuff and just assume that everyone you don't like is a narcissist, and not really understanding that there are things that we need within the word narcissism because we choose not to know more than what the TikTok influencer tells us about narcissism.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, and this is maybe a slightly more controversial part of my argument about this dating stuff, which you briefly mentioned in the intro, is that I think it comes to do with it comes down to a kind of Marxism that's needed instead of, and I don't know if you agree or not, but instead of the sort of concerns about sexuality, gender, and race, it's more of a class issue. And if I can explain that, it's that. Those examples are really interesting. Like, they were worried that OkCupid was being used to prove this eugenics or whatever. So it was like, oh, are the far right going to turn this into some sort of race thing? And there was some other people saying that I think Tinder was like inheriting racial biases or whatever. And then the whole point of Bumble at the beginning was the idea that dating apps were unfair to women or whatever. But for me, all these and you're seeing more and more dating apps for specific types of people, right? So you can have Christian dating, you can have it was famous. There's OK Comrade, this sort of leftist dating.
Gross.
There was Trump.dating. There's actually 2 Trump-based dating sites, and there's all this stuff. But the point is that these are, I think, more like cultural categories, right? Like race, gender, sexuality. I mean, and we can now have a million different ways of talking about race and our own way. We've all got our own identity. We've all got our own, even our own. We can even have some new pronouns or whatever, or we can have some new way of talking about our race or our sexuality. I could be any number of different things, and they're all to do with narrowing and specifying more and more the differences between us at the level of culture, at the level of who we are, right? Whereas it seems to me that due to, as I said, the growing sort of inequality, we're all more similar than ever, but we're desperate to stress that we're more different than ever. So that's why I think it's important to have like a Marxist approach rather than say, I'm obviously, as you know, in many cases I'd be I would be saying that a feminist approach was needed or an anti-racist approach was needed. But in this case, I think they don't really do the job, because they're actually, those things like race, gender, and sexuality, they're actually being used to sort of take us in the wrong direction, to hide the fact that this is actually
I see what you're saying with that. I don't know if I'd phrase it that same way, because there's definitely dating sites. I don't know if it exists anymore because I haven't been on one for years, but there used to be a site called Black People Meet, for example. So there's definitely there's Grindr, right? So whatever sexual preference you have, whatever you're looking for, there is that. And if you're, I don't know, I moved down here to Mexico and I'm close enough to the border that when I was on, I think it was on Tinder and Bumble, when you open up the parameters, I was getting San Diego County, which is pretty damn white. And there were a few people, not a lot, but again, I wasn't on it for that long, that would say like no black guys.
Right.
I don't know if eliminating that in someone's bio is a bad thing, because why the fuck would I want to talk to somebody that doesn't want to talk to me, first of all?
Yeah.
And eliminating that on a bio, does that eliminate that person's personal bias? How many people have personal biases to begin with? And all this stuff does is ramp up our personal biases, right? I want a woman that's 5'3" with a fat ass and huge tits. So all I'm looking for is 5'3" and a fat ass and huge tits. So if you don't have those things, regardless of color, that I can see on the fucking profile, I'm just going the other way anyway.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying, I agree. I'm not saying that we should just like, you know, all be on blind dates or something, because it'll be a waste of time. People should be able people should be able to have or go after what they want. But I think yeah, I mean, it is a really difficult one, I suppose. But I suppose,
let me even expand on what I'm trying to say. I agree with what you're saying, and I don't think anyone that I've heard has put it that way, that we're more alike, we have more in common than we think, but we do this little shit to make us think we don't, right?
And ultimately, you know, that probably is what prevents, you know, buying into that fantasy prevents us from getting the correct kind of material economic change that we actually need. Because then we start looking after the interests of our smaller group or people who have the same preferences as us, rather than the greater.
Well, it makes you feel, I mean, can you admit though, it makes you feel special when you think you're part of a special group?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you're fucking tall. People don't know this, but Alfie is a giant man. He does this thing where he makes himself small on the camera, but when you see him in real life, you're like, holy shit. You're like 6'6", right?
I'm not that tall. I'm like 6'4".
He's lying. He's fucking lying. It's all legs. But
but
seriously.
But I think just thinking about that a bit more. I think that I think the problem is that we've also lost like you said, I mean, sometimes there's such a reluctance to say the thing that your grandma would have said, right? So, you know, you don't just want to be the one saying, oh, it's not like it was, you know, but sometimes it's just not like it was, you know. And like you said, I sort of, with the online dating stuff, I mean, I think people, well, here's my view on that. And I think we talked about this before. Desire, it happens not in a vacuum. It doesn't happen between two CVs. And this is probably the ultimate reason why the current Bumble AI thing is nonsense. Because, you know, if you, you know, say, imagine you see someone you fancy, right? It's most likely going to be, say you're at an event or something, and I don't know, you're watching a band that you like, and you see someone from across the room or whatever, and you've suddenly, you know, you started to have desire because you've seen someone that looks like the sort of person you would like, right? And but of course, it's not just them; it's also the whole room. Right, the bands that are playing, maybe the song that's on, maybe like the bar that you're in, maybe the school that you're in, and the desk, the work, the lesson that your teacher's doing or whatever, and they're doing a certain kind of smirk at the teacher or whatever, and this allows you to start sort of desiring. And so desire, it's like, it's not something that happens between just a subject and an object. Okay, it's such an obvious point. What about like when you go and why do we like? I like trainers. I guess you call them sneakers. You know, I like buying Nike trainers. I guess you call them Nike. But of course, the way they are in Foot Locker or whatever shoe shop, you know, the way they're presented in the shop in the window, like one shoe or whatever, they're not presented like two shoes in a box or on feet. They're presented like this because it's the whole setup, the whole scene that makes it seem so good. If it's an object, also if it's a person, right? So I have, yeah.
Don't stare into the chat. Don't stare into the abyss.
But yeah, do you see my point? That desire doesn't happen between two people. It happens in society, and you fall in love in a community. But what we haven't got are these things: communities, societies, groups, or whatever, which means it's just a one-on-one thing, you and a pile of CVs. And even if the person says, oh, I like Nirvana, and you also like Nirvana, that's not the same. That's not the same as being in a space where that is experienced as a scene, you know? So it just doesn't really work, right?